There are many nice things that I can say about our next speaker. Relevant to all of you is that Chris has had a hand in everything about this conference for 2 years. He is a keystone in our shared success, in our collaboration. And in addition to all of that, Chris works on the Citi Red team with a focus on adversary emulation. He will share with us a methodology for advancing adversary emulation at varying levels of resources and maturity to create maximum value for your organization. Please welcome Chris Tan.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sunil, for the great introduction. All right. Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. Today, I will be talking about maturing threat-informed adversary emulation with ATT&CK. My name is Chris, and I lead adversary emulation here in Citi. So, short introduction about myself. Before I started in offense here, I worked in incident response as well as detection engineering, and I have a bit of a soft spot for detection engineering. So if you are someone who is interested in that topic or in adversary emulation, please feel free to reach out. You can find me at the break. You can find me on LinkedIn, and let's get connected, right? So before we go on to talk about maturing threat-informed adversary emulation, I would first like to get all of us aligned about what am I talking about when I say threat-informed adversary emulation. All right, so what is adversary emulation? As the name suggests, this is talking about emulating an adversary. We're looking to replicate, understand what the adversary is thinking about, what is their motivation, what is their goal, and then replicate their tradecraft, replicate their techniques, replicate their tooling. With adversary emulation comes threat-informed. Why threat-informed? The last thing we want is our defenders being busy fighting ghosts while our adversaries walk in right through the main door. At the core of having a threat focus is to ensure that we know what we are worried about and we are able to focus our resources to cover these threats that are affecting our organization. We want to focus on threats that have attacks that have a higher likelihood of occurrence and place more emphasis, place more defenses, more controls around these areas. So some of you might ask, hey, I have a red team, I engage vendors to do red teaming. That should cover all of that, shouldn't it? So threat-informed adversary emulation here covers a smaller scope of work compared to what red teaming covers. We are limiting the work, the attacks that we're using, we're limiting the techniques that we use when we run these engagements to achieve the goals. And the reason behind this is so that we emulate the threats that we actually see affecting our organization. Is this a bad thing? Well, not necessarily, because at the end of the day, with a limited budget, what we're trying to do is maximize the value that we bring back to the organization. Executives, unfortunately, are more interested in the impact to the organization rather than what is the technical aspects of the latest CVSS 10.0 CVE. And having threat-informed adversary emulation helps us place more emphasis on attacks that are likely to affect the organization and ensure that controls are in place to tackle such attacks. So I'm going to talk about a 3-level maturity model for organizations to get started on adversary emulation and for more mature organizations, more mature offensive teams to up their levels. So at level 1, this is for teams starting out on the adversary emulation journey. I'm going to talk about a prescriptive way you can actually start on such an engagement. Level 2, this is for teams that have more resources and want to expand their capabilities. And lastly, at level 3, this is for mature red teams with sufficient resourcing and supporting cyber threat intelligence. So talking about cyber threat intelligence underpins what we do in threat-informed adversary emulation. The attack matrix is the language that we use to describe the behaviors that we look to emulate and ultimately protect our organization from and against. So at level 1, we talk about basic steps, baby steps. To run an adversary emulation program, we start with identifying a threat group of interest to your organization. The next step is to identify TTPs of interest. Following that, we run atomic testing of TTPs. And lastly, we look at what detections are in place, what preventions are in place, and look at what controls can we look to improve on. So that's really theoretic. Let's talk about how this looks like. So we look at your organization, understand what geography you're working in, what industry you're at, and identify which threat actors, for example, are interested or may target your organization. So say, for purpose of the example, let's say we're looking at APT1. We turn up to MITRE. MITRE has group resources. We head up to that and see APT1, all the way at the bottom, right there. You see that there's an attack navigator layers. If you click on it, it pulls out a list of known TTPs that MITRE has compiled that are relevant to the specific threat actor. So you can start off with here and say, hey, these are TTPs that may more likely happen as an attack against your organizations. Which one shall we look at first? Say we want to look at dumping LSAS, common major threat. We head up to Atomic Red Team. In the website, we search down and search for LSAS and see, hey, there's a list of various test cases you can use to test whether or not your controls are solid against dumping LSAS. So this is available. Now all we have to do is to run the test. Set up your infrastructure, have a test environment, set up Atomic Red Team, run the test cases, and with that, all you have to do is identify if you have controls, you have detections, or you have work to do. Some of you may say, hey, rather than test just one TTP, how about we test a few of them at once? That is also absolutely doable. If you consider, say, for example, let's say if you want to do a web shell attack, someone drops a web shell in your server and runs arbitrary code execution. Can we actually run that as a test case? Absolutely. So that can be a test case for yourself, a few TTPs put together. So some resources that I can share getting started onto this. MITRE Citi has micro emulation plans in the Adversary Emulation library. And this contains a bunch of various atomic test cases you can use to get started on such testing. So the earlier example of running a web server with code execution, that is actually one of the emulations that you can run. Everything is set up there. All you have to do is run the script to deploy and test your use cases. Talked about earlier as well, Atomic Red Team that has a whole bunch of atomic tests that you can use to test against individual TTPs. So this is level 1. We're talking about getting started with your adversary emulation journey. Before we go on to level 2, there kind of is a step 1.5 that I want to talk about, automation. So we want to avoid having, the analyst run the test, wait for a fix, run the test again, make sure the fix is working, run the test again, make sure you have detections in place. And that takes a lot of time for your analysts. And what we want to do is save time by automating testing. By reducing manual efforts, you're also able to spare out resources for them to do more advanced work or build more use cases. Some resources along this way, MITRE's Caldera. We've heard several speakers talk about Caldera earlier. If you're not familiar with it, I can't remember the websites to you, I'm sorry, but Caldera is a security platform that helps to automate adversary emulation. Hit up the GitHub. Caldera also provides several plugins that helps you to customize your own adversary program in a way that your organization prefers or sees more value in. So I don't work in Splunk, but I've seen Splunk have an open source GitHub project called Attack Range. Attack Range is a project that helps automate deployment of your infrastructure, runs testings, and have all of the logs from the testing shipped to a Splunk instance. That's where you can continue to do detection engineering to help build detections around it. Lastly, some of your organizations may have your own commercial BAS tools, and that is absolutely something you can also use to automate your adversary emulation testing. So now we move on to the next step, level 2. Once you're more familiar with doing testings of individual TTPs or a few chains of TTPs, we talk about building up a whole attack scenario. So we want to build a flow of TTPs all the way from initial access to the end impact. Once you have this scenario, you build out each TTP, each step along the way, and we want to do a test with this in a purple team engagement with the blue team. Now, a quick start to this is in attack flow done by Citi, they actually have several attack flows that are already set up for you. So what you have to do is look at it, open it up, and start building the techniques around it. So for example, on the screen here, you'll see, it's a little tiny, but on the screen here, you'll see the attack flow that has been built out for a heist on Swift. So if you work in the bank, Swift might be something that you're really concerned about and making sure that it's working correctly. So in the Swift heist, if you want to build it out, each of the blue items are a technique. So as you build out each step of the way, you test it against your blue team and identify for each technique here, which one of them do you actually have controls with? Which ones of them can you build detections around, or you already have detections around, right? With this, along the way, you're able to identify where your controls lie, at the front, at the center, or around the whole attack chain, and identify from there if there are any gaps that you want to fill or you have resources to fill up. So the value of running a full attack scenario is to allow you to find opportunities for your organization to build earlier detections. We want to be able to pick up an attacker in your environment before there's impact. And the earlier you pick it up, the less containment, the less remediation you have to do. And that's going to save the organization more money. Over time, as you do more of these scenarios, you'll be able to identify common choke points. So common tactics that most adversaries or more adversaries that are targeting your organization may be using. And with that, be able to focus more resources, perhaps, to create more robust controls in these techniques. So some resources for this. Citi's attack flow is core to it. It helps provide a builder that allows you to build a flow of techniques to identify or to design a scenario or design, for example, an incident. Citi also has an adversary emulation library that has several of such attack scenarios that you can use to replicate. MITRE has an adversary emulation plan, a fully fleshed out plan with documentation for APT3. And lastly, AttackGen, a very interesting open source GitHub library I found that helps to build threat scenarios using LLMs. So have a look at it. It requires API tokens for open source LLMs, or you can also deploy your own LLMs for that. Now we move on to level 3, where we want to test your controls. So we take what we've done at level 2, and instead of working in a purple team in front of the blue team to say, hey, we've got this, we've done this, do you see this? We want to do a test in an unannounced engagement. So this is of a higher maturity level because it requires your organization to have mature processes in place to be able to run such engagements. It also places a higher strain on your red team and requires your red team to have more technical capabilities because unlike in a purple team, there are no start overs. You get caught, it's game over. Now, the value of running this level 3 kind of attack engagement is that it gives you a more realistic view of your controls and your gaps. Without the blue team being hyper-focused on what it is that you're running, you'll be able to see if some of your attacks may trigger alerts but go undetected by your busy defenders. This also helps you to evaluate your mean time to respond and mean time to detect, and gives you metrics that you can use to improve your cyber defense. So at the third level at L3 maturity, really is all about thought leadership. MITRE has a section here with resources that talks about how adversary emulation and red teaming can be done, and this could help you mature your program. We're also talking about being able to have your organizational processes available to help support you and your team running such a program. So, a summary of what I've just talked about. start, flow, and test. Start testing. It's very simple to get started on adversary emulation. Build a flow of attacks, make a whole attack scenario, test unannounced. At the end of the day, offense informs defense. What we're doing at adversary emulation is to help defenders be able to better defend the organization by getting them prepared to see an attack when it appears and be sure that they are not missing out on such little hints of an attack happening in your organization. It's not about your offense team trying to one up your defense. It's about working together to protect your organization better. Thank you.